Hey guys, Shalana here. Welcome to the Bin Zone. On today's video, we'll be recapping season 1 of Lost in Space. And guys, if you like what we do here, you like our recaps, our reviews, our explained videos, consider subscribing to our channel as well as joining our Patreon. We would greatly appreciate it. Without further ado, let's dive into this recap. Episode 1 opens up with the family on board a spaceship seated around the table, playing cards and wearing spacesuits. We have John and Maureen, their kids Judy, Penny, and Will. The ship then suddenly crash lands on an ice planet and Judy is stuck under an ice bed. Will and John go look for a way to free her from the ice and they get separated. Will then meets a robot and helps it put itself together. And when all hope is lost with freeing Judy, Will and the robot show up and rescue Judy and the family. Earlier on the Resolute, a woman steals Dr. Smith's identity. Don and this woman, who we will call Smith, crash land on the same planet as the Robinsons. Don ends up finding his chicken. When a storm approaches them, Don takes cover with Angela and Smith ditches the two of them. The robot melts the ice and helps the Robinson recover their ship, the Jupiter 2. John, Maureen, Will, and the robot head out to find a nearby Jupiter that crashed. They leave Penny and Judy behind to finish the process of recovering the ship. John and Maureen stumble onto the robot ship and they get a holographic map of the planet they're on, which shows them that they are in a totally different galaxy. The robot then touches the ship, which establishes a mental link with the robot and Will, and it shows Will what really happened on the Resolute and how it was the robot that attacked that caused the Resolute to malfunction. The storm from earlier is approaching the Robinsons, but Penny and Judy raise the Jupiter just enough to use the ATV vehicle, the Chariot, to reach her family before the storm can get them. On their way back to the Jupiter, they see a flare and find Smith, who claims to be alone. We then get a flashback into Smith's life and we learn her name is June Harris and she drugs her sister Jessica Harris, steals her identity and her spot on the Resolute. Once on the Resolute, Smith gets into an altercation with Jessica's boyfriend and Smith pushes him out of an airlock. Jesus, Smith is a terrible person. Smith is then arrested but escapes during the robot attack on the Resolute. During the present time, the ice layer above the Jupiter 2 begins to crack, jeopardizing the ship. The Robinsons rush to complete the repairs on the ship but find out that they are losing fuel fast. Will and the robot find these large eel-like creatures that are feeding off the fuel of the Jupiter and draining it. The robot then locks Will and Smith in a room for safety. Once the glacier shifts, the Robinsons take off with the remaining fuel and land nearby. They pick up communications from other survivors. Will then finds a 3D printed gun and hides it under his bed while Smith is watching him hide it. Smith and Will end up talking about how and why the robot does whatever Will tells it to do. Don and Angela are then rescued by the Watanabe family. John and Maureen meet the Watanabes on Jupiter 11. Judy then treats Angela and Angela tells her about the robot attacking the Resolute. The survivors soon realize that they cannot communicate with the Resolute since its communication dish fell off. Judy then confronts Will about the robot and they decide to hide the robot in a cave as to not startle the other survivors. Smith follows them and learns the location of the robot. The kids end up running back and making it to their Jupiter before their parents, and they tell their parents that the robot just wandered off. Smith goes into the robot and tries to convince the robot to follow her instead of Will. The surviving colonists then begin to build a light tower to try to signal the Resolute. Maureen, studying the weather patterns of this planet, realizes that the sun is about to be engulfed by a black hole, making the planet uninhabitable. Don then tells Judy about his suspicions of Smith and her real identity. When the survivors light the tower, Smith shuts off the perimeter fences, which causes a large creature to attack the camp, injuring and killing many survivors. Will then calls the robot, who comes in and saves the colonists while assuming its attack form that triggers the colonists who saw it attack on the Resolute. Maureen then tells John about the black hole and how they have to leave the planet soon, and Penny overhears this. John then convinces the other survivors to allow the robot to stay. John then goes on to teach Will about responsibility and the weight of having to care for the robot. Don, on the other hand, takes Victor Dar to retrieve fuel from a Jupiter that landed in a nearby desert that has no eels. Penny tells VJ about the black hole and he promises not to tell anybody. Smith then proceeds to manipulate Angela into shooting the robot, who goes into attack mode and scaring the colonists and hurting John. Distraught by this, Will commands the robot to walk off a cliff. Will is then confronted by his mom and confesses that the robot 3D printed the gun and he took it and hid it. Smith denies blame for Angela's attack on the robot and blames Victor Dar. Maureen and John get stuck in a tar pit and she confesses that she doctored Will's entrance exam to the Resolute. Don and Judy then lose fuel from the fuel tanker. Smith then finds the robot and tries to piece it together. VJ ends up telling his dad about the black hole and Victor decides to use the fuel from the tanker on his own Jupiter and escape. John breaks into Victor's Jupiter and triggers the emergency shutdown. Maureen then comes up with a plan to get all of them to launch by stripping down their Jupiters. That way the fuel will help every Jupiter to take off. Judy then tells Maureen the truth about Smith, and Maureen arrests Smith and locks her away. The Resolute sends a message telling them that due to the radiation levels, they have 24 hours before it leaves the orbit for good. Dawn and John decide to launch into Jupiter 4 for a test flight, and because Smith knocks out Maureen, John is unable to check vital systems within the Jupiter and it explodes. Dr. Smith then drives Maureen to the alien wreckage and forces her to help her put the robot back together. Will then finds a cave with frozen biomass that can be used to fuel all the Jupiter ships. John survived the explosion. Judy finds Smith and Maureen and incapacitates Smith to save her mom. We then get a flashback and find out that the Resolute was built based on alien technology. The robot reactivates itself and is now following Smith's orders. We then shift to John and Dawn in orbit, clinging onto the Jupiter 4 wreckage with a few hours of oxygen left. Everyone launches off the planet with the fuel that Will found. The Robinsons end up trapping Smith and the robot, and they reroute the ship to go save John and Dawn from orbit. Another robot attacks the Robinson ship to get the alien engine, and Will is protected by his robot. John saves Will from falling into space while the two robots fall out of the ship. The alien engine on the Jupiter 2 then launches the Robinsons into a whole nother solar system, which Will recognizes from the robot's drawing. Anyway guys, that's the recap of season 1 of Lost in Space. Again, if you like what we do here, definitely hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and consider joining our Patreon. We would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, binge on.